Welcome to the Father Alchemist. This is a show about karma, surrender, and transformation. It doesn't matter what you're struggling with. It could be motivation, money, vices of any kind, drugs, alcohol, porn, shopping, food, your health and fitness, family and kids, spirituality, your business, career, anything mind, body, spirit. The Father Alchemist is a show that will help you transmute and use all that pain to create the gold version of you, the best version of you. We're bringing in some of the top minds to give you a different perspective, to make you think, and most importantly, to help you change from the inside out and the outside in. The goal of the show is to give you support in your journey to becoming the best you in all areas of your life, so you can be proud of the individual you are and not held from being the greatest version of yourself. Please follow me at The Father Alchemist on Instagram and follow the show on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. If this show gives you value, a fresh perspective, if it makes you laugh or makes you think differently, please rate the show on your favorite podcast app, share it, like it, and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. Now let's make some magic happen.
A lot of people where I'm from don't make it out. I know that I'm blessed. It's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a check.
For those of you that don't know Joe Legolvan.
Yes, sir.
Joe Legolvan. Joe is somebody that I was introduced through another guest that was actually on the show. And I've been in this space where I've been searching for help with personal brand. And it's a whole world that I've never understood. And Joe was introduced to me. He's a husband, father, has an incredible personal brand. He's a physical therapist. He helps people with mental health and fitness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Is there anything you would add to that?
Ultimately, it's also, I guess, like branding, helping people brand themselves in a big way. And a lot of what we were talking about earlier is a lot of business guys come into the social media world from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes is a mistake, because they end up spending a ton of money on ads. They end up coming at it with the best content, quality content, and then they don't get any traction. They wonder why. And it's because it's a completely different mindset, and it's a mind flip. And it's not necessarily... I wouldn't say it's like there's a right way or a wrong way to go about it, but there is a more effective way. And coming at it from a business mind isn't necessarily the most effective way in social media, because you'll see the young dudes come out there, post some vulnerable video that's crappy quality and go viral. And then you'll see the business guys pour, thousands of dollars in their content, and they're like, well, how come I'm not getting traction? And so I kind of come to, I guess, help guide these type of people into the social media world, saying like, here's where you're going to get the most traction. Here's where you're going to get the most influence from this and get the most bang for your buck, so you're not out there wasting a ton of money.
Yeah. And we sat down and talked for a couple hours. I actually kind of felt bad leaving. I'm like, dude, I took a lot of this guy's time, but I just felt like the conversation went in such a great direction, and it gave me so much to think about that I hadn't thought about before. And I think, I can see it from both sides. Like on one hand, listen, like I'm a capitalist. I want to make a lot of money.
Sure.
So there's always this like, how do you monetize? Like, what's the end game with it? But right now I'm in a place where I don't really know the end game and how it changes for different types of people, right? So I'm just in this exploratory phase where I see the business side of it, but there's also a big part of me that for the first time, I'm like, dude, I can help millions of people, man, because I have this part of me that I think honestly everybody has inside of them. Everybody has the ability to do something great with their lives. They were meant to do something great with their lives, but maybe they've never had an outlet. And I know my outlet has been the mortgage business, and I've had other, creative hobbies, but for the first time I'm like, okay, if I can get clear on my message and how I'm communicating that, I really believe I can help millions of people. And so it's nice that I can see the, like, how do we monetize it on the back end, but But honestly, I think I said to you, like, I don't care if there's zero ROI for several years. Like, I just want to reach as many people as I can.
Sure, absolutely. And the cool part about you, and I think we can relate on this, is we've had some success in this world, right? But we've also had the dark night of the soul. You know, both of us have been in some pretty dark places. And a lot of people can relate to that, you know, because connecting on ideas is very difficult. You know, if we're going to say, like, I'm going to connect on, this is my view of reality, this is my view of life, this is my view of politics, those type of things, everybody's kind of got their own, you know, opinions nowadays, which is great. But connecting on emotions, we can connect on a ubiquitous way. And most people, when you start talking about, hey, I remember how this feels, or I remember how it feels to be lost, I remember how it feels to not have a purpose in my life, most people are like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's how you kind of draw people in with your message. But also the other thing is, like, perfection is the enemy of execution, right? And a lot of the guys who came out, you know, the Cardones, these different guys who have really touched millions and millions of people, they came out with their message initially, and it was a little skewed one way, or it was a little off. And even some guys I know that, like, you know, first listen to Cardone back in the day, like, this guy's a blowhard. Like, I didn't believe anything he said, and they were in the same business. And then ultimately he's refined his message. He's created such an amazing brand that he is now touching millions of lives. And so I think ultimately it's just like getting started and just start putting out stuff and seeing what hits, seeing where people are resonating with you. Because if part of it is kind of designing what you want, but the other part is just start putting it out, you know, and seeing how it picks up.
Which is super reassuring for me because I don't know if I shared with you, but like, as I kind of went down this rabbit hole, I mean, it's been, you know, probably like a couple years of me just analyzing this whole thing to death, you know,
Right.
which I got really frustrated with myself about, because I've always been the guy, like, if you talk to anybody that knows me or has known me for a long period of time, they're like, Derek's the guy that gets an idea and he just goes and does it and like figures it out later. But all of a sudden I found myself, and I don't know if it's because now I'm a little older, or I've done one thing for such a long period of time. Now I've got a family, so I'm like, there's more of a conscious, like, choosing, because maybe I feel like my family's at risk, and so I got into this place where I was just overthinking everything. I was analyzing it to death. Right. Now, I think it's important to be prepared and to do a certain amount of research, but I guess it all kind of came to a head where I'm like, dude, enough is enough. Right. Like, now I just need to do it. Yeah. And so now that I'm doing it, now I'm like, okay, now I got to get more clear. But I don't think I would have ever had the inclination or like the desire to even, reach out to you and meet with you if it wasn't for the like, okay, now how do I get really clear with my message and be impactful and actually put a strategy behind this?
No, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, again, can relate to that. And as we get older, as we establish ourselves, as we have families, we have a lot more self-awareness around who we are and what we project out into the world. Mm-hmm. And that can be a detriment, in some ways, because we're saying like, well, hey, what is my family going to think? What is my friends going to think? What is my business going to think? And there's got to be some level of just not caring, in a sense, and just being like, hey, this is me, take it or leave it. And this is what has helped me. And I think that relieves a lot of stress, because all you're doing as if you're teaching online is you're saying, this is what worked for me. Take it or leave it. Like, and that's a super authentic thing to say. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I was in this place and I did these things and it worked for me. Try it. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe it won't. You know what I mean? And when you come with that message, there's a lot less baggage that's associated rather than projecting something like, hey, I've got this thing that sort of might work in the future, and try to teach people that. And a lot of people do that, where they'll come out, and you'll see it all the time, especially with brand coaching or any of these guys. Some of these guys who don't even have a brand will be teaching other people how to have a brand, or haven't done anything in business, will be talking about business. And that's why I like somebody like yourself. You've had success in other businesses, so you know what the hell you're talking about. And there's a lot of people that could benefit from your message, of consistency, of discipline, of all the things you've learned to build yourself to this level. a lot of people could really feed off that, you know?
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, I always feel like I'm a bit of an imposter still. You know, I think it's because I measure myself against the best, right? Now, let me clarify what I mean by the best. Like, I'm specifically talking about money, right? And ironically, money is probably where I have the greatest feeling of unworthiness.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, that's a whole nother thing. Like, I'm working on feeling worthy around money,
Right.
but yet I'm comparing myself against the people that are worth $1 billion, that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So,
Sure.
But I also think that a lot of those people, they're and a lot of them have phenomenal messages, don't get me wrong, but sometimes unrelatable to the guy that's making a couple $100,000 a year. That's like, dude, okay, I'm making 250, but shit, if I made $500,000, like, that would change my life. Or I'm making $500,000, but if I made 7 figures, like, dude, that would change my life. Ironically, you know, I think once they get there, they realize the money isn't actually the thing that changes their life. It's who they have to become during that process of
100%.
getting there.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes, the Jim Rohn quote. Don't become a millionaire because of the money, become it because of who it will make you become in the process, right? Yeah. But I think, you know, the big thing right now, especially in the mental health space, is like comparison is the thief of joy. And I like that quote, but I don't like it because I think in a sense, comparison can level us up in a big way. And I like to surround myself with people who are doing better than me. But I've also got enough, I don't know if humility is the right word, but enough self, like, where I'm like, oh, I can tolerate that. You know, a lot of people can't tolerate being around people who are better than them because in a sense they're like, well, what does that make me? You know what I mean? And the best example I have is like, what if like Gandhi or Jesus said like, I'm just going to be better than my brothers. You know, I'm just going to build a few more houses than my brothers. And comparison doesn't only necessarily make us feel bad when we're not at that level, but it also takes us off our purpose because our purpose could be so much greater than the people that surround us. For example, your purpose could be so much bigger than the billionaires who are out there talking about money. And your purpose could touch so many more lives. And when you really align with that, when you really align with that purpose, it doesn't matter where you're at because you're just speaking from your authentic self and being like, hey, this is me. This is what I've learned. And you may end up touching millions of more lives because of that. You know, just like if Jesus was like, hey, I just need to build 10 houses because my brother built 8. And that's where my comparison is. It really would limit his potential and it would limit his destiny. So I think in some senses we want to compare to level ourselves up, but we also want to realize our purpose could be greater, you know?
I want to stay on that for a second because purpose is something that for me, it has been for sure the most challenging exploration of my life. Like, you know, and being in business, you know, when you go to workshops and conferences and you're around a bunch of high level people, like chances are you have come across at some point some class or some coach that is talking about defining your purpose. And I was always the guy in the room that felt like, man, like, what am I doing wrong? Because I never felt like I could articulate my purpose. And I feel like I'm now scratching the surface of it, which is like the most unbelievable feeling. But it's also scary, right? Like you mentioned earlier about not caring what other people think and being able to just communicate the message without judgment. You know, I was listening to this podcast the other day with Brad Lee, and he's talking about how most people just go to create the content. He's like, no, be the content.
Yes.
Like you are the content.
100%.
Just be the content. And when I heard this, I thought to myself, okay, I know what I actually in my heart and soul want to be able to talk about. But right after that thought is, but shit, like if I share that, people are gonna like, how's that gonna look with my business? And are they gonna judge me with the money? So there's all of those feelings of insecurity and
100%.
like, should I, and how do I deliver it? But now I've gotten to a point where I'm like, even my wife last night, man, it was the coolest thing because I showed her this little clip and like she lit up and she's like, Derek, you have to tell people what it is you're going through right now. Like you've got to document all this shit. Like she's starting to see it and I'm starting to see it, but I'm I guess just excited to see that come to fruition because I'm kind of over it where I'm like worried about somebody judging me at this point.
Absolutely, man. And that's huge. And I think your self-awareness around this comes more from a business standpoint, which I get, in a family standpoint, which is super, like that's an authentic place to be. But also the fact that you're able to share, hey, I do feel insecure in these areas. That is amazing because I'm in the same boat. We all have those days. I wake up and I've got like 3 coaching clients I've got to talk to. And I'm like, well, my life's still jacked. You know what I mean? Like I still have things I'm dealing with and now I'm going to talk to these people about it. And ultimately that's why I like the coaching space because a lot of times the things you're saying are going right into your own ears, and they're things I needed to hear that day. But also like when it comes to purpose, I think finding your purpose to me is like really easy, but living it is very difficult. And to me, by finding it, I think it's to just become the best version of you, to become the most authentic version of you, right? Like to express your soul at the highest level it came here to express itself in. Not putting yourself in one little box, like saying like, yeah, that's one area of my life I want to explore and become, but there's all these other areas that are just inside of me that I want to express and become. And being able to do that in a fearless way and give that as a gift to the rest of the world. As you become that highest version of yourself and giving that out to the rest of the world, that is everybody's purpose here. But living that is a much more difficult thing, because it's a unique thing too. And that's why I say it's easy to define because your purpose is going to be different than my purpose. Your goals are going to be different than mine. But at the same time, the overriding theme is going to be similar,
So I know we just sort of like jumped right in, but I'd love to go back a little bit because I don't think we talked about kind of how you got here, right? Yep. Like before, because by the way, like go check, tell people how they can find you right now before it gets to the end of this thing. But
so I'm on Instagram, Mental Health Fitness Dad. We've got some YouTube stuff as well out there, but my main thing is Instagram. You can DM me anytime, and I'll write you back.
And guys, when you go and check out his Instagram page and you see the amount of followers that he has, like when I found out that you had built that within 18 months or 12, a year and a half, I'm just like, holy cow, dude, that's remarkable. But what, like before you entered that space, what were you doing? And like, what was the impetus that, got that light bulb to go off for you where you're like, dude, this is it, right?
And I think that's what's cool is we can both relate on this level is the fact that we both had businesses. I've got a business that I work with rehab facilities and work with people that are recovering and stuff like that. And I've done really well in that. But there's a part of me that says there's more to this life. Like I want to give back. I've got so much to say. I've got so much to communicate with people. And I see so many people suffering, in this world. And with that, it's kind of like, okay, how can I give back in a sense? And then from there, I got a really good coach that kind of guided me in that process as well, which was really helpful because when we get that guidance, it kind of just confirms what we already know. A lot of times you're saying stuff and the guy will be like, yeah, you're right. And then you can kind of take it and run with that idea as opposed to being like, well, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. And that definitely helped in that as well. But I've seen a lot of suffering in my life. I've been through a lot myself personally. And I think the things that have helped me have helped others as well. So like when I share these things with people, they're like, oh man, that's what I needed to hear at that moment. And I've had a lot of mentors growing up that have helped me. So it's like a lot of it's just regurgitating things that have helped me as well. And so it's just that message of giving back and living that purpose. And so where I'm at, where I think we can relate is the sense that you're like, hey, there's more. I want to create something more. I want to build something more. And that's where I was at about a year ago. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I just basically listened to everything that my coach was explaining. And then from there, it was like, okay, I'm going to run with this. And then it picked up traction from there. So, yeah.
And never, ever have I felt so convinced that hiring a coach is like the ability to time collapse, right?
Exactly.
Especially like, okay, so I've been in the mortgage business for 20 years, right? And I didn't hire a professional coach at a high level until about 5 years ago. So I had this, like, we'll call it a 15-year run of me fucking it up and trying to figure it out before I was like, okay, I want to take it to the next level, and I hired a coach. But there was already a somewhat of a track record of success prior to that.
Right.
Whereas now entering into a whole new space, I'm just like, dude, first of all, I don't have 15 years to try to figure it out in a new space, right? But also, why would I want to? Like, even if I had the time, the ability to time collapse, I think, is so valuable. Like, and it might be something very simple, right? Like your ability to help me get clarity on my purpose. It's like, I know that that's the missing link that I need, right? To be able to really excel and communicate a message. But how did you find your coach? And was it something where you were looking for a coach specifically to develop content or a brand, or were you already consuming content and then it sort of was like, man, I could do this too?
Right. And I think for me, it was both. Like, I had tried it on my own for several years, and I would try things and I'd be like, kind of like, this didn't really work. This didn't really hit. And then I'd back off for a few months, and then I'd get inspired again and then go back to it. And then finally, with my coach, the funny thing about my coach is, there are certain aspects of his life that I would not want to mimic. And every good coach, like one of the things I had learned recently is like the idea that we are losing our heroes in society. And what do I mean by that? Like, everybody can get picked apart, analyzed to death. And it's very difficult for people who are cynical to find heroes in this world anymore, because you can find something wrong with everybody, right? You can find out that MLK had multiple women on the side, right? You can find out that maybe Mother Teresa's, thing was maybe not helping as many people as she said, or something like that. And there's an entire world dedicated to destroying Mother Teresa, one of the most unpolarizing people in the world. And so because of that, we will really demonize our heroes. And for me, it was kind of the point like, hey, yeah, this person may not be perfect, but he gets this aspect that I'm trying to learn from. And then I just learned that aspect from him to such a high degree. And everything I would run through him and filter, and he'd be like, yeah, do this. No, don't do this. And from that point, it started to hit, because that is the world he is in, he is very good at, and he knows how to kind of create that buzz around you and create a online persona. But again, I think the biggest thing I've learned watching it, when I talk to a lot of the business guys coming into this world, they hit it with the money first. And what I mean by that is their content is just phenomenal, right? Like the best videography, the best, backgrounds, the best everything. And then they'll get very little traction with that. And for example, I have this young client, he's like 20, he's in the UK, and he went out and talked on TikTok about how his mom died when he was 13 and what he went through. And it was like some crappy video. He probably filmed it on a Samsung, you know what I mean? It was like crappy quality, and that sucker went viral. And it was like, because he was coming with an authentic message, something that he worked through, something he went through. And so what I really like these business guys to do is come out and say, hey, like, yes, I've created a strong brand. I've created a strong business. Hey, yes, I'm professional. Yes, I will get the job done, but I'm also human. And here I am to expose that human part, in my life. And there's one guy specifically that I'm starting to work with, and he's an insurance guy, and he's got a very strong business with that and everything. And he's coming out with really quality content around insurance and different things. And I'm like, hey, you need to start doing a day in the life of your life. What it means to run an agency. What did you do this morning? What was your morning routine like? What did you go through today? Did you have to hire somebody? Did you have to fire somebody? Obviously not getting into specifics, but what does that look like for you? That stuff will go so much more viral than you explaining why American Family got downgraded as an insurance, whatever, right? Like that is, yeah. So it's kind of bringing the mindset around that, because you'll save a lot of time, you'll save a lot of energy, and you'll realize that you're connecting with more people on a deeper level, Mm-hmm.
I've been meaning to ask you, like, you're obviously in phenomenal shape. this is kind
You
of
as
a
well,
two,
brother. Yeah.
thank you. Kind of a two-part question. One is, what was it like, or what was the process like for you identifying your own purpose? Was it something that that you struggled with, or were you like just clear one day on what it was, or was this built up over time?
Right.
Then you develop clarity, and then what role does fitness play? Because it's become part of your brand,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And so I always look at that and go, man, okay, if that's part of my brand, we talked about this the other day. It's like, shit, like, what happens if it's 20 years from now and I'm not in incredible shape? Like, what happens to my brand? And so on one level, it pushes you to live at a high level, which is phenomenal. You're having to hold yourself to a higher standard because that is the brand.
Yes.
But is there another side to that where you're like, well, fuck, what if, like, what if I can't sustain that forever? What is that? How will my brand change as a result?
100%. And I think with all of these things, it's like we don't want to get the picture mixed up with the frame. And here's what I mean. Like, the picture is the content. The picture is the actual message. The frame is what surrounds it, right? The frame is fitness. The frame is money. The frame is success. The frame is maybe girls, right? Like, a lot of these guys come out and teach guys how to talk to girls, right? Getting that girl, getting that hot girl you want. That's the frame. The content is self-development. The content is working on yourself. The content is becoming the best version of yourself. Waking up every day and saying, what is my next step to become the best quality human being I can, and give that gift out to the rest of the world. And whatever form that takes over the next 100 years or whatever that I'm around, hopefully, knock on wood,
Now with technology and medicine, you probably will be.
I like to plan long term. I mean, who knows? I could die tomorrow, right? But I like to think long term like that. Over that next long period of time, like, the content is going to change, the form is going to change, the frame is going to change. But the actual message, the main underlying theme of self-development, of becoming the best version of yourself and for everybody around you as a gift to give out to everybody else, that will never change. Whether that's with my body, whether that's with business, whether that's with mental health, whether that's with spirituality, right? As we get older, we get a little more deeper and we get a little more in touch with our spiritual side. Whatever that is, that's going to be the message. But it always comes down to simple things like discipline, consistency, having a vision, finding mentors, all these different ideas that are, we'll go back 1,000 years and find them. We'll go forward 1,000 years and find them. 1,000 years from now, there are going to be two guys talking like this. We'll be in a hologram or something, but we'll be talking about discipline and self-development and these type of things, so.
That's cool. And then what about for your purpose? Like, how was that developed for you?
I think a lot of it came through my personal experience, right? So to kind of bring it back, I lost my sister about 10 years ago, and it was through basically like suicide, I guess you would say, or taking her own life, but it was also like an overdose situation. And watching her go through that and watching the experience of that was very heavy for me and my family, right? And the one thing about her was she was very self-aware, extremely self-aware. And I wouldn't say self-aware as much as self-conscious, very self-conscious. She really knew her impact on other people, but she knew it to such a high degree that she had a lot of guilt around that. She had a lot of feelings of, oh, I could have done better. I should have done better. I could have been more. I could have, all these different things. And that kind of put her in such a headspace where she thought the world would be better without me, which I saw the results of that. The world was not better without her. There's a lot of people that are probably struggling because she's no longer in that world. And what that spoke to me was, number one, just showing up. Just showing up in this world is the most powerful thing you can do. I've got a young son right now, and just me hanging out with him is probably one of the most powerful things I can do for him. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, I got to show up in the right way, or I got to do the right thing. And a lot of times it's just being there, just being around him. And same thing when it comes to delivering content. And you don't actually show up and you don't actually film, you don't actually put it out there, you're not going to touch that person's life who might need it at that time. And a lot of us, we won't necessarily take ourselves out like my sister did, but we'll take ourselves out of the game because we feel like we're not good enough. We feel like our message isn't refined enough. We feel like we're not ready, you know what I mean? Or that maybe we'll rub somebody the wrong way, or all these different self-accusational kind of ideas. And once we remove that and say, I'm just going to show up, the people who resonate with it are, people who aren't, it totally changes it. And for me, with watching my sister again, it's like, hey, I'm going to show up in the best possible way I can. I'm going to be there for people I can. Because again, somebody who was that self-conscious like my sister and very, looking at how her impact was on the world, it actually it created such an environment for her mentally that she decided it was better to not be here. And again, for me, that's the idea I want to basically oppose 100%. Like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be as clear and authentic as I can, because just being here, showing up for people in the best way I can that day, and it may change from day to day, is the best service I can offer them, no matter where I'm at,
I'm sorry to hear about your sister, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah.
I think there will be a lot of people listening to this that, they have either dealt with something similar, or maybe they're going through it right now, or maybe they themselves are in a place where it's a dark place, right?
Sure.
Maybe they're thinking about making a bad decision, I've been in times personally where I've thought about this.
Sure.
I've thought about this primarily when the market crashed in 2008.
I believe it.
I was in my late 20s. I was making what I thought was, a lot of money. I was living in a, couple $1 million house at the time in Sherman Oaks, California. I just looked out my window. My $100,000 car just got repossessed, and I'm walking everywhere. Banks stopped lending money. My business got shut down. I was in the depths of addiction. I was struggling with my health. I was overweight. I mean, it was the darkest place that I've been in. And what are some like little tactics, or I hate to use the word tactic with such a dark subject, but for somebody that's sitting there just going, yeah, but you don't understand, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason for me. Like, they're in a place where they don't even have the ability to think about something that they might be able to do, because their right has just imprisoned them into this state of depression.
Right.
They don't know what to do, but they're listening to this, so they're obviously searching for something. They want an answer. Like, any suggestions for that individual that might shake them out of that state of mind?
Right. One of my favorite lines, I grew up from a Christian background. I'm very religious tolerant, very open-minded myself, and I work with people all across the board in different faiths and stuff. But one of my favorite quotes from the Christian religion is, we overcome the enemy by our testimony. And what you just shared there is your testimony. Yeah, I was in this dark place, but look where I'm at now. These are the things I overcame. I may not be perfect. I may not be, in this state that's necessarily where it was or something like that, but I'm in a much better place now than I was. And I think listening to people who have been through that and relating to it and hearing it is really the best way we can overcome it. And for me, like, that's why I love Cardone so much. Cardone is like, a lot of people will say, oh, well, he does this or he does that, and they have a lot of negative things to say about him because of the different tactics and methods he uses. But if you listen to him and you listen to his heart, he talks exactly the similar story like that. When he was, I think, like 25 or 30 or something, he was in an addiction rehab. He had completely lost everything. He was broke. He was depressed. He was out of shape. He was all these things. And then you look at him now at 65 and he's like ripped and he's a billionaire, or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's possible. And we need these examples. We need to hear other people who have been through it and to relate to. We need that hero in our life, or that hero's journey, to look at and say, wow, if they've done it, I've done it too. So one tactic I would say is listening to people who have been through that. And for ourselves, when we're in that state, is looking at the things we've overcome in the past. We all obviously have issues nowadays, right? Like, the market has shifted now. I'm a real estate buyer. You're a mortgage guy. We see the interest rates, what's going on now. And a lot of those past feelings can come up, or past fears or past things. but we can also look at it from the perspective of where I've come from. Like, hey man, I've been through this. I know what this is like. I know there's, after winter, spring comes, and then after spring, summer comes, and then we'll have another winter, It's like one of my favorite, Jim Rohn stories is him talking about people, and it was in the 80s, and he had a big group of executives around him, and they said, Jim, a ton of people from around the world. He goes, what is the 90s going to be like? And Jim goes, yes, I do know a ton of people around the world. He goes, I have a lot of connections. He goes, I know exactly what the 90s are going to be like. He's like, lean in, fellas, lean in. And they all do. And they go, all right, Jim, tell us. He goes, it's going to be like it's always been. And they were just like, what? And he goes, I say that being, facetious, but he goes, I'm also saying it to prove a point. And he's like, after spring, winter, after spring, summer comes, after summer, fall, then winter, then it repeats. And he's like, it gets dark, and then what happens? It gets light. Things change, seasons change. And he's like, the guy looks outside, it's dark outside. He goes, what happened? What happened? He goes, well, it's nighttime. You obviously haven't been here long enough to know that it's nighttime right now, and eventually it's going to come back around. And so with that perspective of being in that place where the market corrects, where life corrects, where things change, but still being able to hold it down and going back to our root of self-development, working on ourselves in any form or fashion we can at that time, and preparing for when the spring comes, because it is going to come. Things are going to change. Your life is going to change. But the biggest thing that's going to change it is if we change. We change ourselves, because the seasons are going to come regardless, but how we prepare for those and how we actually work on ourselves is what is really going to impact that,
There's a quote I'm going to paraphrase, and I've heard it said it a couple different ways, but it's that you can't think your way into a better way of living, right? But you can live your way into a better way of thinking.
I love that.
And being and that's been so true for me. And to add to what you just said, I think when I think back to that moment in my life where I'm like, all is lost, what's the point? I was totally hopeless. But there was something within me at the time where I'm like, well, I can't just, what am I going to do? Just sit in my house the whole time now that I don't have a car?
Right.
So what I ended up doing is I ended up walking or running down the hill to, I think it was a 24-hour fitness that was down there, and just pouring myself into exercise at the time.
Yeah.
Right. Which I didn't feel like doing. Right. And I think that for anybody that is intellectual, or they claim to be intellectual, it's really easy to want to solve the problem by thinking about and dissecting what's happening to try to mentally come up with something that's going to fix it and make me feel better, but it's never fucking worked.
Right.
Ever.
Right. Yep.
Yep. But anytime Anthony Robbins talks about it, changing your state and how important that is, right? And being able to do something, physically that changes the way that you think. And, for me, that was just exercise. I was just doing something, because every single time I finished, I always would feel differently.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like adding those small wins together, and suddenly, I'm not in that place anymore, and I'm starting to make little strides and wins to pull myself out of it.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something, to come back to your original question, how has fitness kind of played a role? I can definitely relate to that. And that's been my go-to. Every breakup I've ever had, I've put on 10 pounds of muscle. And it's
that's awesome.
And all revenge abs or something.
Yeah.
It's I've come through, my own struggles with it. And just like you said, it's hey, that's the small win I can do today. Maybe I can't sell, 10 mortgages today or whatever, but I can get my pump on, and I can feel good about that. And really, I think to come back to your original question, it's what can you do in this moment? Yes, you may have 10 things wrong in your life. Yes, you may be getting a divorce. Yes, you may be losing all your stuff. Maybe your business is failing. but what can you do? And the answer is typically, well, I can drop and give myself 50 push-ups, you know what I mean? And I can go for a walk around the block, and I can listen to a positive podcast, and I can, think about a few things I am grateful for. I can think about my health, or I can think about, the connections I do have. And so bringing your mind back to those things and then working on those things, and everything kind of spreads out from that. But yeah, fitness has been fundamental for me throughout my walk. And now that my life I've got a lot of good things going on, I still keep that fitness as my, my main source, because if I lose it, one of the things my coach talks about all the time, he's like, I've got enough money to not work anymore. And he's like, but I could be in my Rolls Royce, doing blow with a stripper or something. And he's like, I'll feel terrible. He's like, but if I have all these cars, if I have all this money, if I have all these different things, and I quit my daily habits, he's like, I will spiral so fast. So he's like, even when I was in jail, that's one of the things my coach talks about. He's like, even when I was in jail, when I was on my habits and I was doing my daily routine, he's like, I'm happier than I am out here with all my cars, all my house, everything, if I miss my daily routine. And so it comes back to the simple, tried and true methods of changing our states, of moving our bodies, of taking care of ourselves in some fundamental way. It will alter our mindsets, and then we can kind of build around that.
Doing something that you can feel good about, or proud of, even if you don't feel like it was a super successful day, right? Yeah. There's a ton of those for me where it's okay, that wasn't super successful. I didn't schedule any appointments. I didn't close a transaction. There was nothing, and it's funny because I judge that based on some monetary gain,
sure,
right?
Of course.
But then at the end of the day, I look back and reflect and go, yeah, but you know what? I did what I said I was going to do.
That's
right?
Powerful.
And sometimes it's not anything crazy. It's just like right now, literally my daily commitment is 13 phone calls to realtors.
I love that.
That's it.
I love that.
13 phone calls. Now, listen, a lot of people listening to this are like, dude, that's ridiculous. You should be making 100, right? Some people are going, man, fuck, I wish I could make 13.
Right. Exactly.
Because I'm distracted by a bunch of other shit. And I go, look, I know myself, and after a while, it kind of gets old making a bunch of phone calls to real estate agents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But yet that's the business that I run, and I know that I can move the needle if I stay consistent with it. And so it's not really me getting hung up on what happens. It's just me committing to doing the footwork, and then a bit of surrender. Just going hey, God, you take over from here. Yeah. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to follow through on my commitments, and then you show me what you want to show me.
Absolutely.
And I can feel good about that.
And that's such a powerful message right there, because, the universe does not waste opportunities on the ill-prepared. And I think that is a powerful quote, because a lot of people wait for the opportunities before they prepare. And the people who are successful, they prepare, and then the opportunities come in. And our preparation will create the opportunities. And a lot of that preparation is setting some standard every single day, following through on that, and then letting the outcome be what it is. Not like a nihilistic point of view where I don't care, I don't have any, whatever, but also like a point of view where you're saying, yeah, I care about these things and I want to create these things, and therefore I'm going to do said things every day. But whether that happens this day, or whether it happens 10 days from now, or whether it happens a year from now, I don't care. I'm just surrendering the outcome. I'm going to do my 13 phone calls that day. And I think that is it. What's funny about it too is one of the oldest spiritual texts we have known to man is actually the Bhagavad Gita. It's about 5,000 years old. And there's a story in there where Arjuna, he's a warrior, and Krishna, who is kind of like an idea of God or whatever, is explaining to him to fall in love with the process and don't worry about the outcome. So 5,000 years ago, they understood the secret to success is falling in love with the process and letting the outcome be what it is. And again, 5,000 years from now, we'll be talking about, hey, fall in love with the process, do what you're supposed to be doing that day, and watch what happens. Watch how opportunities will come to the prepared, and they will avoid the ill-prepared. So if we're not doing those opportunities every day, that's a fail. And that's one of the things I learned in the fitness world as well. Is one of my coaches, when I was getting in shape, he's like, I would take a picture, I would send it to him, and the picture wouldn't really look right, or I wouldn't look good in it. And he'd go, well, did you do your habits that day? Did you eat your macros? Did you follow your fitness routine? I'd be like, yeah. And he's like, well, that's a win. And then another week I'd send him a picture and I'd look amazing. Feel like I looked awesome. He's like, yeah, did you follow your habits? Nah, I kind of went out and partied this week. I kind of ate a burrito, blah, blah. And he's like, well, that's a fail. And so the win and the fail was based on, did I follow through with the things I could do, not on the outcome. And as soon as we get out of the mindset of like the outcome's got to be a certain way, then it's a win, rather than the process got to be a certain way, then that's a win. Then everything shifts in our minds. And it's really the way to sustain success is we fall in love with the process. We keep that process going regardless. And then the opportunities keep coming in. Whereas as soon as we lose that process, that's when we're setting ourselves up for future failure and future missed opportunities.
So I want to talk about that a little bit more because so there's the fall in love with the process, right? And just commit to the things you need to do to live the greatest version of yourself, or to create the greatest version of yourself. But then I would imagine like when you started all this, there had to have, well, maybe not, but I'm assuming there had to have been some sort of end goal in mind, right? Sure. And so like falling in love with the process, like I'm all about that. Yeah. But for me, there's also got to be some way to measure results, right? Yeah. To just, because for me, it's like, okay, am I on track at all, right? Because you can run, passionately in the wrong direction, sure, right? And then you're going to end up dissatisfied because you're totally off course. So how, like, do you have any sort of checks and balances or metrics to measure your success? And what was sort of the end goal for you when you started all this? Like, what is it that you really envisioned for yourself? Like, if you fast forward 10 years from now, what is it you're trying to create?
Right. And that's and obviously a lot of these topics are so nuanced, right? Like it's never black or white. There's always the checks and balances. And I love that, from Tony Robbins, don't run east looking for a sunset. Wait, no, is it east or west? I always get those mixed up. But anyway, he's like, if you're not getting the results you want, and then we have that time of going back to the drawing board saying, hey, am I getting the results I want? Hey, is this paying off? But what I find is a lot of people will check out too soon. And that's probably one of the things you've learned in this business as well, is people will come in, they're like, hey, I'm going to make $1 million this year selling mortgages. And then after the first year, when they didn't, they're like, well, this isn't for me, or whatever. So I think there's a level of that where we do need that, but it's nuanced, because a part of us has to be in that mode. A part of us has to be in the mode of, hey, I'm going to do this regardless. The thing that I fall in love with the self-development world and helping other people world is I'm never going to stop this. I'm never going to stop this. I don't care where I'm at. I don't care how old I'm at. There is never going to be a day I wake up and think, it's not a good idea to work on myself. It's not in whatever form or fashion. And it's not a good idea to help whoever's in my life at that moment. There's never going to be a day where I wake up thinking that. And once I kind of like surrender to that idea, where every day I want to wake up, work on myself, and help somebody in the process, and know that that day, if I do those things, that's a success to me. And the outcomes will come, the positivity will come, the business will come, all those type of things will come. But if I do that specifically, whether I'm, 20 years old, whether I'm 90 years old, if I'm in the nursing home, my nurse comes in and I tell her she looks pretty today, I did my goal that day, right? Like I made her feel good or whatever, as long as I'm not coming off like an old creep, It's like, I did my thing. Exactly. Oh man! I actually funny story. I used to work at a nursing home, and I worked, because I with the PT stuff. I remember there's this old guy, and I was wheeling him around, and he was like probably 98. He never said a word, and he was an old war vet. And we were rolling around, and he's like, "Come here, I gotta tell you something." And I'm like, lean in. He's like, no, come closer. Lean in. I'm like, oh man, he's gonna say something profound. I haven't. This guy's never said a word to me. He goes, there's a lot of good looking tail in this. Like, that's awesome, man. But again, I know for me in my life that becoming the best version of myself, trying to do whatever I can to do that and to help other people, that is always going to be in style for my life. That's always going to make me fulfilled. That's always going to make me feel good. And so merging my business and merging my life around that concept, where as long as I'm doing that every day, on some level, like I'm going to be happy. I'm going to live a fulfilled life. Because, fulfillment and getting things done can be sometimes very different. A lot of people can check off a ton of things on their list to do, but their fulfillment sometimes can be off. And so making sure our fulfillment is aligned with our to-do list, and when those things are congruent, I think that's when we're living a very fulfilled and productive life, and you can live a productive life and an unfulfilled life, and you can live an extremely fulfilled life and an unproductive life. And I think both of those are mistakes. It's always the middle path. And so finding that production with fulfillment and combining the two, I think is the key,
So I want to talk a little bit more about personal brand, right? Yeah. And I know you work with people in many different industries, right? And I don't know if you heard recently, but in the real estate business, the National Association of Realtors, NAR, came out, and there was this big lawsuit that they settled for, I think, $430 million or something, right? And it basically, the idea was that real estate agents in this sort of industry has colluded for a long time on paying commissions that are between 6 and 7% of the sales price of a house. And so the argument is that, okay, listen, if you are selling your house and you want to pay the buyer agent a commission, you should have the ability to pay him whatever you want. But the industry has been set up in such a way where it was almost like that's what everyone was doing. They were just saying, hey, if I'm going to list your house for sale, I'm going to charge you 3% or 3.2%. And the buyer's agent, we got to pay them 2.5% to 3.5%, right? So by the time it's all said and done, that seller is paying 6 to 7% of their equity. And it's almost like this cartel where everybody's doing it. And so, so they settled for $400 million. And that industry is changing. And I know that they're saying about 1 million realtors will get out of the business as a result of this change, because now you're not allowed to advertise what you're willing to pay the buyer's agent on the listing.
Oh, you're not able to.
You're not able to advertise or market that anymore. Now, it hasn't gone into effect here in Colorado yet, right? But imagine you're working with an agent, you want to go find a house, and so you're looking at a bunch of stuff online, you find properties you like, but as an agent, you have no idea if you're getting paid. So now it's your responsibility as the buyer's agent to say, hey, Joe, here's the deal. Like, we're going to see if the seller's paying a commission. We won't know until we contact the agent. But if they're not, my commission is still 2.8% or 3%. If they're not going to pay me, I need you to understand that you're going to have to pay me.
Wow.
And so it's going to create this situation where, like, if you're not an agent that knows how to communicate value really well, probably going to go out of business. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're predicting about 1 million agents getting out of the industry. And so and look, I could see the writing on the wall. Like, I think anybody that's been in this industry for any length of time, they may not have been able to say this is why, but there's been a suspicion that just shit's changing, right?
Yes.
And like, this industry is going to look very different because of technology.
Yeah.
Right. And it's already changed a lot. But the reason I'm saying this is because I think that personal brand is going to be critical.
Absolutely.
To not only a real estate agent, but really, I believe, any industry, 100%. Right? Because, like, if you're in a business, right, where, any industry there is, it's there's competition, right? But if you're somebody that emerges with a personal brand, you're going to be one of 100 people. Right. Now, it may feel like, because you're in the space, that, it's like, God, everybody's coming out with a personal brand, which is true. There's definitely like momentum behind it. At the same time, I can tell you, the people I'm talking to, it's like 1 in 100 are actually doing something about it. So they're going to emerge, and it's going to be perhaps a whole new business that emerges as a result of it. I just read something that said right now there's about 70 million podcasts. By 2030, it's going to go to 110 million.
Right.
Which is like 1 in 3 people are going to have a podcast.
Yes.
Right? In the next 6 years.
Right.
Which is crazy to me. So what would you say for somebody that's, you know, they're kind of on the fence? Maybe they're a guy like me where they're going, man, I hate social media. I don't want to do it. But at the same time, I see where it's going. Yeah. And I should probably get on the bandwagon. Or the person that's like, I just don't know what my message is. How would you encourage somebody to like get more involved and start?
Yeah, 100%. And that is such a powerful thing you just said there. And I like to see the future as well. And I think that's why I realized personal branding was so important. And the big thing with the AI and a lot of the automated things going into that world, there are going to be a lot of jobs that are kind of taken out of the thing. But one thing you can never take away is somebody's personal brand, because that is who they are. They're literally projecting who they are to the world, and people are resonating with that, right? Like no matter how good we get with AI, and there's talk about it, like these AI personal branders, nobody's going to fall for that, right? Because people want to relate to a human being. People want to relate to somebody who's been through the same stuff. People aren't going to be able to relate to an algorithm. You know, they're not going to be able to relate, even if the machine looks and feels like a human and it says all the right things. They know in the back of their mind, this is a machine that does not know who I am. It does not know my emotions, doesn't know what I'm going through as a human being. And therefore, you know, personal branding is really the way to kind of protect yourself in this new world that we're heading into, because people want to work with people they can relate to. People want to work with people they like. And so if you can project that out into the world in whatever business you're in, that is a way to protect yourself, because this is the world where dinosaurs are going to die. You know, the dinosaurs, they died off because they didn't fit into the new world. Even though they were huge, they had all these great things and stuff. And it really gives a chance for the small guy to win, because the smaller guys can come out there with an amazing brand. They can touch a ton of people, and they can blow up bigger than the big conglomerations, you know. And we see that a lot with these bigger brands. They'll come out, they'll spend, you know, $10 million on a commercial or whatever, and they have the highest paid whatever on there. And the commercial does its thing. It may, you know, touch some lives. And then some guy will do a TikTok post and end up touching way more lives, you know what I mean? And end up connecting with more people. And so it's kind of made the media world a little more ubiquitous, where everything's kind of on an even keel. And that's what I love about it too, is in this world, you know, and especially I'm sure when you grow up in the Sherman Oaks area and different things, you had the different levels of society, right? You had the kind of like highfalutin, and then you had the kind of lower and different things. And these societies would kind of keep a bubble around themselves in a sense, right? Now with social media and stuff, that's kind of opening this up, where you can get, you know, you can get in a DM with somebody who's a high level guy and start talking to him, start chatting his ear off and stuff like that, and really connecting with it. So I would say that's the biggest thing you can invest in, is your own personal brand, because it opens up so many doors in business, in life, in relationships, and connections. And if you're not doing it in 2024, you're really missing the boat. You know, you're really missing the boat on that. And nobody likes social media. Like, I don't know anybody who sits there and is like, I love this crap. I hate it. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people do not like it. And especially guys in our generation, because we look at it, we didn't grow up with it. We're like, this is stupid. You know, why would I come out here and talk about my feelings or talk about whatever? But really, when you start to open up to it and see how you can use it, how you can connect with people, how you can really change lives, it starts taking away that you know, cynicism around it. And then people are like, yeah, okay, I get this. I understand it, you know.
I had I wrestled with for a while until, you know, I heard somebody talk about just selfishness, right? Like, if you have something that you can share that can help people, like, it's almost your duty and responsibility to share it, because if you don't, then you're not able to help that person. And
right.
It's just and I never thought of it that way, right? Sure. And the reason I never thought of it that way is because I was being selfish and I was caught up in ego.
Sure.
Know?
Yeah. I can relate. I can totally relate to that. Yeah. If you have a message and you're not delivering it because you're scared of how people will view you, it means your ego's bigger than your message, you know. And I love that quote from, you know, Wes. And again, it's like, I always look at every day and say, if I died today, would I be happy with the life I'm living? And if I'm doing something that is beyond my ego, I'm transcending my ego, I'm doing something to help people regardless of my ego, that's a win for my soul, right? That day I can die happy. Whereas if I live my whole life, and even though I might have all the success on paper, I might hit all the numbers I think are going to make me successful. If I'm 90 years old at that moment, and yeah, I made a crap ton of money, I did whatever, but I was not living my soul's purpose. That's a failure, in my life. And so the cool part about personal branding is we really get to merge our soul's desire for communication and for helping people in with a personal brand. So it's kind of a win-win, because you're not just winning on a physical realm, on a connection realm, on a monetization realm, but you're also winning on a soul level where you're able to actually give back in a way that a lot of people have desired to do throughout their lives, but we only let the preachers come up and do that. A lot of guys had great messages that went into churches back in the day in the 1800s or whatever, but the preacher was the guy who delivered that message. You know what I mean? Now we get this idea where we can come up on our soapbox, explain something that may touch a ton of people's lives, help them in a big way, expose our weaknesses, expose our flaws, and expose what helped us through that, and touch a ton of people's lives, and also create a brand around that. So I think it's a win-win, doing this. Mm-hmm.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Guys, go check him out at
Mental Health Fitness Dad on Instagram. Yes.
Mental Health Fitness Dad on Instagram. Joe, the real deal. Thank you so much, brother,
Appreciate
for coming
you, brother.
on. I feel like we could go down the rabbit hole on a million different things.
Yeah, always.
It's always fun for me to talk about. So hopefully you come back and we'll do it again.
Absolutely, brother. Love it, brother. Yeah.
Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck.